this meeting. Now I will call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order. And are there any corrections or adjustments to the agenda that we need?
Move we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we have an agenda. We have our minutes from April 10th where we really dug into the budget. Did folks have a chance to look through those minutes?
Move approval of the April minutes.
Great. We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Better do it, Greg.
I'll second the approval of the minutes from April 10th. I'll call the question. All in favor of approving the minutes as presented indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay, that's unanimous as well. Okay, unfinished business. We have the fiscal year budget. I wasn't sure. I don't think it changed substantively from last month, did it?
No, it didn't change substantively. We just removed, there were a couple things that seemed superfluous and not really needed, so that we removed in terms of some descriptions of grants and programs. So no, it's essentially the same. And as I mentioned in the email, in terms of the purpose for this meeting, again, as Lynn and I started talking about and debriefing from our last meeting, we just realized that there were some things that we wanted a little bit more discussion with you all on, needed a little bit more direction. And again, I know our meeting last time got pretty rushed, or we just didn't have time to finish. And so actually that's something that Lynn and I have talked about and suggest that for future Finance Committee meetings, particularly where we're going to have full topics, maybe we plan on starting at 8:30, just to make sure that we've got plenty of time. And then if we adjourn early, then that just means there's a little bit more time before the board meeting starts at 10. So that was our suggestion. I don't know if that would work with the committee or not.
Any objections to that?
That's fine.
Okay, yeah, let's plan on finance meetings at 8:30, and then it would be great if we could have a little break. And if we don't, that's okay too. So yeah,
Right.
this is important stuff.
Okay, great. Well, I'll work with Debbie, and she can get the calendar invite sent out for future meetings. And again, we'll start at 8:30.
Great, thanks.
So yeah, so we just wanted to, again, just a quick recap of the draft budget. I think Lynn has some things that she wanted to highlight in there. And again, there's a lot in here, but again, as I've said, I think last month, I feel that it's a solid budget. I think it's a budget that focuses the agency on the things that we need to be focused on. I mean, succession planning, staff turnover, and we've been dealing with that. And I think we're now kind of behind that largely. And so, but it's infrastructure improvements, strategic planning. So with that, I'll hand it over to Lynn to hit a couple highlights and open up for discussion.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, welcome everyone. Nice to see y'all, and thanks for meeting again. And as Jeff indicated, there are very few changes from the April Finance Committee meeting with the budget. We did make some minor adjustments to the budget overview, the first 4 pages. Again, very minor adjustments. And as Jeff indicated, we did remove the description of all the programs and grants that ORCAA administers. And basically the budget package is pretty much the same as you saw it last month. And some of the overall highlights, as we indicated, we did apply the CPI to the budget, and that was from the December 2023 ending, which is 3.5% to all the fee programs and a 3.5% to salary cost as well. So you'll see the 3.5% added to the draft fiscal year 2025 salary step chart. And we've also identified the programs that are unfunded and or underfunded are relying on the core funds, which we get from EPA, pass through to ecology, and then forward to us. The budget continues to set aside funds consistent with the board resolution for the contingency and capital funds. It also assumes we're continuing with 100% occupancy in all of our 7 rental units. For the revenue, of course, we're projecting a $3.4 million revenue, and that includes the contingency draw as well. Without the contingency draw, it's a 3.1. ORCAA's applying for various grants throughout the fiscal year, especially special projects that further our mission. An example of that was with the American Rescue Plan that assisted in the infrastructure at Chesapeake. We also intend to apply for additional grant funds that are air related and that assist in electrifying ORCAA's fleet. So we'll be hopefully forming some partnerships to strengthen our application as well. I know that Jim Cooper had indicated that as a strong point in future apps, or maybe it was Greg. One of you from the Finance Committee, thank you. We're taking that upon and utilizing that. There are no major increases or decreases in our ongoing funding with any of our grants. Grants are all multi-year, which is a good thing. It helps stabilize your funds as well, and also for budgeting purposes. They range from 2 to 5 years versus the single year. Remember the old days where there were single, every year we'd have to go through multiple application processes and signing of contracts. So this is a good move. Fee programs include the 3.5% CPI. Again, that's per the board resolution 274. And the fact that it does exceed the resolution's parameters of 3%, staff have completed a workload analysis on all the fee programs to back up and support the reason for exceeding the 3%, which is slightly, 3.5%. The Title V program, which is one of our major programs, that program has to be self-sufficient. It cannot rely on other funds to assist in subsidizing it or covering its cost. Other income, we are included interest income, penalty and settlement revenue, and miscellaneous income reflected in the budget. The interest income is a slightly higher amount, of course, due to the fund balance. We're on the next page. Thank you, Dan. As I move on, please stop me, hold me, ask questions. Don't hesitate. Let's see. So that includes the revenue summary. I'm happy to move on to the summary of expenses unless there's questions, or Jeff, you'd like to add anything? Okay, so for the budgeted expenses, we're at 3.4 million, slightly 5% over our fiscal year 2024 budget. Our payroll expenditures represent the largest portion, 81%. And then our non-payroll 10%, building M&O 4%, and then our direct operations 5%. At this point, ORCAA has included the premium for the paid family and medical leave. It's typically funded by both employee and employers, but ORCAA has elected to continue paying this on behalf of the employee. We'll also continue with the labor and industries portion of the employees. That's also included in the budget, about $4,400. The budget also includes a fully staffed agency, 19.2%. What is that 2%? That is our landscaping and our maintenance. The others, they're all the other 19 full-time employees are your, your admin staff, compliance, engineering, monitoring, and IT. As I indicated earlier, the budget does include a 3.5% salary adjustment, along with a 4% increase from Association of Washington Cities, the Employee Benefit Trust. The budget includes funds for compensation connection for HR related information that we need to have them review for exempt versus non-exempt, and also assistance updating parts of our personnel procedures manual. It also includes money to set aside for updating our strategic plan. Once we haven't done that since 2018, so we're due for it. It also includes funds, $10,000 for staff development work. The continuation of a contract we have with Rhizome They're the ones who are responsible for our website updates, and we need the ongoing maintenance and support with them. There's some proprietary information there, so their assistance is needed to maintain the website. Also, let's see, we're going to continue contracting with ADP for our cost savings with the payroll processing. Again, a huge amount is saved with using our ADP, and it's working out very well. We're about 1 3/4 years into using their service, and it's working well. We got good systems in place, and it's great to have Laura on board to assist in that process as well. Did I say thank you for allowing us to hire Laura? Thank you, thank you, thank you. You hear the drums and the balloons in the back. No. So thank you. I so support that. Thank you. Appreciate that. Oh, ORCAA is going to undergo our next audit with the state auditor's office the end of this year. I'm estimating it to be about $19,000. That is also in the budget. Budget includes the purchase of an electric vehicle to replace one of our aging vehicles as we work towards electrifying the rest of our fleet. It also includes the cost of installing a 2-plug EV charger at our offices. Jeff had actually received some estimates from conversations with the city of Tumwater, as I recall. Again, we're gonna try to offset costs with applying for grants. Also, we are continuing to invest in our office building. There is a part of the budget that includes an office building maintenance and leasehold improvements, which details out the projects. We've included a small increase with OLIMAP to support their work reducing the hazardous burning in our homeless camps. That wraps up our expenditures, and ready to move on to contingency and capital funds unless there's any questions.
Any questions? Sounds all good to me.
Okay, contingency and capital funds. The contingency represents balances set aside for specific purposes. This was signed by resolution by the board, and it includes our emergency set aside, office building improvements, replacement of monitoring equipment, the new agency budget, and of course the payment of vacation and sick leave on retiring or folks that are leaving the agency. We anticipate the ending fund balance of June 30th, 2025 to be $3.8 million. ORCAA is going to continue to set aside that 20% for the general fund emergency reserve. That's equivalent to about 2 months of operations and administration. As you know, in fiscal year 2024, we received a significant amount of civil penalties, primarily due to the one source, Crown Cork and Seal. And staff are looking at establishing guidelines for using future revenue from penalties and settlements. And we're looking to provide you with a recommendation in the next couple months or next fiscal year. So yes.
Well, actually, that's, I think, something we were going to talk about later this morning, right, Lynn?
Correct.
Yeah. So, all right. So maybe we could stop here in terms of the budget, or I don't know. Do we want to look specifically at the next page, page 5, or but then once we're done looking at the budget, then we can talk about the issue of the draft resolution, and specifying how we're using penalty funds. But let's finish with the budget first.
Sound good?
So nothing's changed from the last month's meeting. As you can see, scrolling down, our revenue is estimated at $3.015 million. That's before use of contingency. Our expenditures are estimated at $3.4 million. I don't think you can see my cursor, but Dan's cursor, he can point to the $3.4 million in expenditures, and the line right below that is the amount of money that will be, well, actually, the majority of that is the administrative reserve. we're actually taking 425 from the administrative reserve because 10,000 of that will be set aside for the Title V contingency. So basically, we have a balanced budget. We're using 425,000 of our contingency draw, and we're projecting real income of a little over 3 million.
And can I just ask, when we go into the regular meeting, I don't think last month you gave this detailed of a presentation, but I just want to make sure that I don't want to repeat poorly what you said, Lynn. So are we going to have this basic presentation as we break into the budget with the larger group today?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, yes, we will go through it in detail, in some amount of detail, because we did not discuss it last month.
Right.
But we will talk about it today, and it essentially opens up the public comment period on our budget, which then at the June meeting we'll have a public hearing, and the board will take action on this budget.
Gotcha. Okay, great. I just want to make sure that that was my understanding. So that's great. We're broaching it this month. Okay, sorry. Please continue.
All right. So that wraps up the revenue, expenditures, and appropriations. The second page is the fund balance, or the next page of the budget is the fund balance. So what we're seeing here is the third column. You'll see that is the fiscal year 2025 budget that we're looking for approval by the board. All these numbers track back to what we just talked about in terms of the revenue receiving during the course of the year, fiscal year 2025, a little over 3 million in revenue, and our expenditures of 3.4. It ties into the projected ending fund balance of 3.8 million that we highlighted in the 4-page summary. It also reflects the 425,000 draw on the general fund contingency. Following that, you'll see the contingency and capital funds that the board has previously approved that we will continue to set aside funds. The emergency contingency fund, represents 20% of expenditures without the Title V expenditures, because that would be like double dipping into a reflection of what the contingency. So it's separate. We have a emergency contingency of 20%, and we also have the Title V contingency that is also about 20%.
And maybe this is a good place for me just to jump in and say that, so at the April meeting, we talked about, and Lynn and I had suggested the possibility of increasing that contingency that set aside from 20% to 30%. After having some additional discussions with folks, talking to some other local air agencies, I guess I'm recommending that we leave it at 20%. According to GAAP, generally acceptable accounting principles, I think 17% is the recommended amount. And so I think leaving it at 20% is sufficient. Of course, we'll likely have more than that, but in any event. So if you're wondering about what happened with this discussion about increasing it, Lynn and I, from our perspective, we're ready to table that and just to leave it at 20%.
Great. No, that seems reasonable.
Drop it to 16, but that's fine with me. At the meeting.
Go ahead, Randy.
I just want to say, and hopefully at the end I get a chance to apologize to Jeff first, but on this thing right here, I want to say that I actually hope you'll reconsider that. The reason why is, as I said in my county, what I did, it took me a long time and a lot of battles, but I run a 25% reserve now. On top of that, I have reserve on top of that for IT, for cars, for all these other things, and that's how I'm able to put the money away. When I first started in the middle of the year, I had 175,000 cash on hand. We were broke completely. This last year, by doing things in this manner, I now have $25 million cash on hand just in my general fund. I think it is a wise move, and I actually get a letter every year because we moved to cash and everything, saying that that's not appropriate as my fund keeps growing and growing and growing. So nobody ever bucks at it when we actually have the money when we need it. So if you consider it and reconsider it, I think with that extra money we have that came in, I think it's a really wise move. And then people don't budget it. They budget away from it. They leave that money alone. The more we store away, the more they won't get it. But we know it's there when the time comes and there's an emergency. So I just hope you think about it a little bit more, because I was actually very excited about what you had put together, and I thought it was a wise move, especially for this organization. Thanks.
I mean, do we want to have any more conversation? Jim, do you have a perspective? I mean, we have a staff recommendation to keep it at 20%. We have some interest to raise that contingency. I'm, fine with generally.
Yeah, we just went through this whole conversation at the city and decided to keep it at like 16.5 or 17, because that we have, the what we call it here, the undesignated balance. We use different words, but that is on top of the programmatic reserves that are in place. And it just makes sense to me to keep it more flexible for the mission of the organization and not lock it up unnecessarily. Like, I get what Randy's saying, but I think we're good at cash management, and to me, I don't know what the purpose of that reserve is. Like, we have a massive downfall of revenue, or we have to close. Like, they're pretty extreme situations, and I think I would have to be in a lot lower undesignated balance position before I would want to consider putting more money there for a rainy day, when I feel like we're okay on a rainy day already. But I tend to like flexible funds that aren't dedicated, so it's just a philosophy difference too. So
Yeah,
Well,
I tend to go ahead, Randy. Sorry.
And that's the idea of it, though. Although it's there, it doesn't look flexible. It's extremely flexible in the future when you know it's there. That's why we do it. And although the other's fine, we want to be able to withstand those really low times without having to have increases, and that's where that comes in. But just keep in mind, I'm not going to have any problem with keeping it the way it is, but I can assure you, it definitely works to do it. We have that extra money that came in, so it's different from a city or what is, as we need to expend the monies that we are not reserving and stuff. Here we have the extra and we don't have to. So that's what I was just putting out. But I'm good with the recommendation of the board. But think about it, because putting it away just means the people that are not there here in the future, they'll have it when they have to rely on it. Because things do happen. They always happen. 10-year cycle. Just, we'll see it.
Thank you, Randy. Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, and this might be something that feeds into our strategic planning discussions that we're going to have in the coming months about, because I think part of those discussions will be, how do we want to invest and use the penalty funds and that we have, and is there something specific that we want to do with that? And so we could be intentional about, well, we do want to set more of it aside for emergency, or as opposed to spending it on projects that are going to align with the agency's strategic mission. So,
Yep. No, that sounds really appropriate, Jeff. Yeah. I mean, because I do want to make sure, Randy, that we have this conversation and really kind of go through and explore the idea. Okay, great. Anything else to present on the budget, Lynn? Should we move on to the resolution?
you're on mute, Lynn.
You didn't need to hear me sneezing, sorry. So the other pages of the budget basically include the maintenance and leasehold improvements for our building in more detail. And then the next page has to do with, and the next page, there we go, is a history of the salary cost adjustments, including the dependent coverage assistance for our families, our employees' families. And then the next page includes, is the updated salary chart that reflects the 3.5% salary adjustment. And then finally, we have our updated agency org chart. Following that are all the updated fee schedules and copies of resolution 274 and 275 that directs staff to conduct workload analysis when the fee increases over 3%. So that includes our budget presentation and all the attachments. Any questions at all, or anything?
Real quick, Lynn, what's your timeline in the cycle to come back around and repopulate the 5-year forecast of cash?
What would you like to see, and when would you like to see it? A 3-year, 5-year?
I mean, we've been in the practice of having a 5-year, but it's not necessary for me to adopt the budget, but it's really necessary for me to think ahead.
Agreed.
You know, so I think the picture you've got is fine for the budget. So if it's in cycle for you to do something like that after we do the budget and just talk about, you know, where we are from a cash position because that's actually a better place to talk about reserves for me, is like look at the 5-year and look at all the different accounts and have that conversation outside of the budget.
Agreed.
So I'm not asking for you to jump through hoops, but my comment is that I'm concerned about the burn rate.
Yes, agreed. So I am good at providing possibly with our year-end financial. We can
Okay.
also provide a 5-year. That'll happen likely in August.
That sounds great.
I think that's
Actually, probably September.
Oh.
We'll see if the board agrees to taking August off, I guess
August,
later
I
this
thought we were-
morning, but perhaps September.
August. Okay.
They will.
Okay. Okay, sorry, I thought that was July we were taking off. August, okay, so September, if that works, yeah.
And as for myself, I'm not as needy of a 5-year forward, but I usually like, as you know, to see to be able to wrap up looking at 3 years backwards so that I can keep history in my mind as I move forward. That's always important to me. It keeps me from making the mistakes.
So you want to see a 3-year look back and a 5-year forward? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, but I don't care about the 5-year forward, to be honest with you. I give you 1 year, but I like seeing the 3 years backwards so that I can plan for what the past has shown us.
Yes, understood. Okay, I can do that. 3-year look back, no problem. That's easy. I got all those numbers.
Well, and
I think
usually
Jim
end up
did
providing
indicate that-
something like that anyway. You usually give that stuff like that to me in the past anyway, so I'm just telling you that I still like it. That's all. You don't have to do anything special for me.
I think Jim did ask for, and a lot of people like to see the projections, you know,
Yes,
September.
got it.
Both ways.
Okay, and it looks like a 3-year look back, 5-year forecast at the September finance meeting.
I think you got to go back way further than 3 to see any use of that money, Brandy.
Yeah. No, the thing that for the 3 is for all the rest of the budget, because what I usually will spot when I see a 3-year is, wait a second, you're saying that I'm going to get 100,000 this year, and I've got 20, and I got 100,000 3 years ago. What was the change? And that's the reason why I use that. So I run a 3-year average in my head for my budgeting.
Okay.
We all have our different tools we use. That's mine.
Yep, agreed. Okay. I hear it. Okay, got it.
You know, it's funny working with you. I don't actually usually need that because you provided that to me in the very beginning years over and over again until you basically proved to me that your numbers were right, and then I kind of stopped looking.
Oh, we want you to continue looking.
I'm just saying,
Yes.
you know, Jim, you remember how I used to be when I first got here. I didn't trust any of them. And you had to prove it to me, but after a while I kind of said, yeah, I know her numbers are good. There's no need to fight it.
Yeah, we appreciate y'all looking at the detail, providing guidance, and asking the questions. The questions are very important. So thank you. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
On to the resolution.
Yes, I think so. So I can give again a little context here. So again, we talked briefly about it last month and just needed more clarity from you all on kind of next steps. So the intent is just to clarify for ourselves and for staff, for the board, and for anybody who asks what we do with penalty and settlement money. Of course, we got a big chunk in the past months that's maybe made this more of an issue than it's been in the past. And I did speak with the director of another local air who has also gets large penalty settlements, and he just commented that in the past there had been some disagreement among board members about how the money was to be spent, and so found it helpful to do something like this, basically just clarifying that it's to be spent in a way that's consistent, that the full board agrees to, and it's in a way that's consistent with the agency's mission. And so that's what this intends to do. It's not intended to really, to do anything different than what we're already doing. It just puts it in writing, essentially. And yeah, as I mentioned, the main point is just clarifying that the agency's funds are used in a way that furthers the agency's mission. And consistent with it, consistent and approved by the board. There isn't any particular timing on this. Again, it could be part of we could take it to the full board in the next month or two, but I don't think it necessarily needs to. So just wanted to get your thoughts on it. So that's why we brought it up again.
I love this. And the reason why I love it is for the same reason I said earlier, and it actually accomplishes what I was talking about early. I love the line that we put in that will be receipted into a separate contingency fund. In a sense, that becomes a reserve if that's how we decide to treat it. That's why I like the other idea of the 25 and taking that out of this directly into it. But I think this is a great idea. I think it helps to put some restrictions on us mentally, if nothing else, because when this is put in the general, it's gone. At least when it's kept separately, well, on most boards, not this one. This has been a great one for that. But you just put it in the general, it's gone. You keep a separate line item like reserves and stuff, it's what protects it. So I'm more than 100% behind this. I think this is the way business should always be conducted.
Thanks, Randy. I have a little question. I'm in favor of the idea, and having a policy is great. Looking at the therefores seem duplicative, like the third, be it further resolved, seems like an almost exact quote of the second sentence of the first, now therefore be it resolved. I mean, I don't know if we need to mention twice that we're going to be using board approved purposes consistent with the mission and strategic plan. And then my other question is in the second one, if the penalty and settlement review exceed the fiscal year budget needs, that seems, I guess, a budget need is different than a budgeted item. And I'm wondering if we want to be more explicit about, just the current fiscal year budget itself. It is a thing, not, and in like removing the word needs might that more.
Well, you don't even actually have to have that. You've got that covered in the first one because the board action can move the money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that one's in conflict with the first one because you already receipted it into that account, and then you're saying put it in that account if your revenue exceeds expenses. So I mean, to me, this feels like a unnecessary bureaucratic step. Like, I get what you're trying to do, but it's not how we do business, and it creates another contingency fund that I don't know why we would need. Like, we carry a healthy balance. We already do this in practice, and so I would loosen it up and not require the creation of a receipt account. Like, I'm fine with the language that makes us think about how to use it and those things, but I feel like all of the policies and procedures are in place already to protect this money from misuse.
Please reconsider that though. If I understood what you're just saying, the idea of having a separate line item in the budget specifically for these funds do you have conflict with that, or?
Yeah, I don't see a reason.
Oh, see, that's the part I love about it. It creates another fund for a reserve, basically, that allows us to move it out if we need to.
We should fully fund the reserves we think we need and leave the rest in the undesignated. Like, I'm fine with reserves that are restricted for things we need, but this is like an unnecessary accounting measure that doesn't need to be tracked.
If it's in there in the general fund, it will be spent.
We haven't spent it in 13 years. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's because we've kept basically a reserve, and we've kept that stuff on the side. If you don't keep it on the side and it's just in the general numbers, it will be spent.
I see we have a fundamental disagreement here between Jim and Randy. I'm, I guess, definitely somewhere in the middle, and I'm not passionate about this. I guess, can we apply the gigantic award from Crown to this idea and just kind of walk through what would be the impact with that large? I mean, how would you spend it, or what fund would you put it in now? What would change with that award? Can we just use that as a hypothetical?
Can I speak, please?
Yes.
Yes. So this resolution does not necessarily affect our current fund balance. Right now, we've already collected the 1.9 million. That 1.9 million is already in our general fund.
Right,
the
and so
board
if we
wanted to move
round that to $2
funds,
million and put it into a separate line, then we're at $100,000 of unrestricted revenue in 2 years. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Again, for myself, keeping it separated out like that, it forces everybody that's looking at the money to decide how it's going to be used and how it would come out of that line item, which is never a bad thing. It helps to keep some restriction. The board can decide to take it out whenever they want to take it out. That's why I don't see that second one that was mentioned by Greg as even being necessary. The further resolve, because it's already in the top one with the board action. But by keeping it separated like that, it just keeps an automatic consideration of what you spend. When you have it on the bottom line, then the bottom line starts getting bigger. The amount of money I carry or the amount of paper I carry is in direct correlation with the size of my briefcase. If we have it as a separate briefcase, that's all the money that's in there. People think about it separately and differently. Other than that, you start looking at a bottom line and say, hey, I still got plenty of money. I can still do this and we can expand that. I think it should be a very separate, thoughtful conversation, especially with penalty money, because I'm always afraid penalty money gets used as a reason for operations. With every organization, we're good that we don't, but that could change. We may not be here. I may not be here. So it seems like an easy step.
Well, it doesn't seem like we are ready to make a recommendation here. I guess.
So Greg,
let's
did you get,
Sorry,
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just wondering if you got, I mean, so Lynn started to answer your question about trying to take like a scenario like you asked about how this would impact the money that we got from Crown. I mean, as Lynn mentioned, we didn't put that. I mean, again, because this, if we pass something like, or if the board approves something like this, it would have to put, I mean, we would put the Crown money in potentially retroactively, but I don't know if you got your question answered or if that helped.
I mean, it helps to it's the beginning of the answer. I guess I want to walk with this $2 million through both scenarios. So, so it went into the general fund. Randy's concern is that it will disappear. It'll just get frittered away instantly. Jim's concern, I'm just trying to understand the kind of where people are positions, is that if we put into a specific fund, it's kind of outside of the budget process and we're not really just using those funds. I mean, so basically it's a rainy day fund for whatever the board pushes to. I mean, are those the two scenarios where, whether it's retroactive or whatever with Crown? And
well, the way you just explained it is exactly the opposite of why I would want it, because if you do put it in, it does become part of the general fund. I myself, when I have funds like that on the side, I look at those for one-time expenditures and stuff like that. That's how I can keep and balance my budgets here at the county. That's a tool that I use. But if you put it in the general fund, it does become part of the general use, and unless you're purposely keeping it separate. And how do you purposely keep it separate just in your mind when it's in there?
I actually like to suggest that this isn't really a financial conversation. It's a philosophical conversation about like how you store reserves, that we might be all over the place as a board even. And so it might be worth framing it up with kind of,
well, I think
the merge of Randy and I's perspective so that we can have a conversation as a board.
Well, yeah, let's look it over first, because I do think it is financial as a recommendation or not, personally. This is a financial guideline that we're looking to set up with the budget. It should still come to the board too, but I think we should look at it first as part of our job here on this committee, which is what we're doing. I don't know that it's ready to move forward yet, but
It's fine.
and again, this was a recommendation not by me, but by our staff, and our staff thinking that it was a best practice to set up. I think it's a wise best. It may not be the end all, but it is a wise one. So we can keep track of what comes in, what's separate. There's no need for it to be thrown in unless we decide there is. Then we have a motion and we increase our general budget by that amount for that year for that budget.
And all I'm saying is our budget process does all of the things you just said.
I think this was an
Alright.
option that staff wanted to bring to the board. We
Yeah.
want to bring options to the board. And a lot of times they're recommendations for sure, but we also want to bring the board options to make decisions and assist and direct staff in best practices. And I would like to add that when you're establishing contingency and capital funds, you want to have a specific purpose of why you're establishing those set aside funds. Yes, ORCAA does have a 20% administrative contingency. That's good. That contingency, that could be used for a shortfall, catastrophic situation, the closure of the office because of who knows unknown. It could be a $500,000 deductible on an employment claim with Endurus. So that's the specific purpose for that emergency contingency fund. There are reasons behind that for sure. If the board does want to consider a separate contingency for penalties and settlements, we really want to attach a purpose behind it too, is what I would recommend. Attach a reason behind it too. The SAO, they test our reserve accounts. The SAO looks at these set asides. And when I'm reporting to the state auditor's office on an annual basis, a lot of these, they don't allow me to categorize as undesignated or designated. So it's either designated or undesignated. And I've footnoted that the SAO came out with new classifications a number of years ago, I think in 2019, what's committed, restricted, assigned, restricted and assigned and committed. That's either outside parties, contractual, or security deposit. Those we cannot touch. Those are definitely restricted funds. The expense contingency is not considered a designated. All of the, the office building monitoring, those are all undesignated too in the state auditor's definition. Now, that's paper. Yes, that's true. But internally, in order to use these contingency and capital funds as they're currently established, the board has to approve staff to actually access and use them.
Right now they do.
Yes, sir. Correct.
Yeah,
right now.
totally.
Correct.
And we have like a third of our money locked up. Like, so where's that line need to lie? And to me, I don't disagree with what Randy's saying, but put it in a purposeful place, not just a strategic reserve. We already have that. Like,
Well, what would be the purpose of this? I guess from Lynn and Jeff, I mean, you guys made this recommendation, right? I mean, I think it's often it seems like the purpose is trying to head off, a conflicted board, running afoul of itself and having other issues as they negotiate the use of this. That could still happen with this contingency fund, I think. I mean, I'm not sure if that would eliminate. So what would you call this fund? What would be the purpose? Would it be a designated fund, or would we have to come up with a strategy for it before we created it?
Well, I mean, I think, and again, as I'm listening to this conversation and thinking about it, I think it maybe should tie in because to our strategic planning conversation that we are going to have in the fall. And I think part of that is updating the agency's strategic plan, but also thinking about how do we want to use our penalty funds. I mean, again, given that we've got this large penalty settlement, do we want to use it? Yeah, I mean, what are the projects? How does the board see using this money going forward? And so maybe part of that. So it's not like, I mean, I don't have a particular thought about how to use, or a recommendation at this point to the board about how to use the penalty funds. And so I can't say that we're putting it in, we're creating a separate account and we're going to use it thus. I mean, or here's my recommendations to the board. I mean, so again, as I'm listening to this, and yeah, our board does not currently have the problem that the other local clean air agency board is experiencing. And so, again, let's just maybe put this aside, keep it in the back of our minds for the strategic planning discussion that I'll be working on, kind of teeing up in the fall, and then we can come back and maybe have more discussion, maybe initially with this committee, but then with the full board about, does it make sense to establish this separate account? I mean, I don't feel strongly either way. I'm kind of conflicted as well. I mean, I see some benefit to being able to track it and being able to say, okay, yes, Crown money was used for these purposes, and here is the projects that it funded and all of that. But I also, I see the ORCAA and the Finance Committee and the board as being very intentional and very purposeful about how we're using our money and how we're investing our funds. And so, is it needed? Probably not. So again, I'm kind of conflicted on it. Or
Yeah, and another option is it should work along the strategic plan and mission of the agency. But when we provide you with that 5-year forecast, that might answer some of the questions we have too. Because
And that's what I was gonna say. Like, if we pass this budget, we already did everything we're talking about. That money is spent because we created a bow wave with one-time money, and we have to figure out how to fund it in the 4th and 5th year right now, or we won't be able to operate at the level we're operating today. So, I mean, if that money was still real, I would be open to more conversation.
well, there will be. I mean, I don't expect this burn rate to continue, because as we've talked about, I mean, we need to look at our fees. There's other
There's
work
one time in there as well. So yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. I mean, and again, a lot of it is yes.
Okay. Well, we should probably wrap up. Randy, why don't you give your last thoughts, and then I think tabling it till the strategic planning. And I guess one other question that I have too that I'd love to see is, compliance uses some of these funds. I mean, they have a lot of labor and stuff that goes into it. I guess I just want to see that reflected when we come back and talk about this again too, as the indirect costs or whatever that should go to compliance from penalties to make sure that they can do their work. So, Randy, last thoughts to you.
Yep, mine is always fairly simple in this. Never do I ever look at an organization as this is the end all organization, the people that are in front of me, because I know they always change, and I know eventually they change their mind and how they do things. And so I always structure everything I do not looking at the people in front of me, because I trust the ones that I'm looking at on this camera right now. I absolutely do, but I don't trust the ones that are coming in the future. And one of the things that I do believe is when organizations like this, when I first came on, I was looking to fight it, but it didn't have to. But you do sometimes have to fight these organizations, because the natural path for these type of organizations is to start utilizing penalties as a way to get revenue, to be able to pay and fund their stuff. By doing it separately, we can still benefit from it by one-time expenditures, specific programs for a limited time, things like that. It would be ways that we would utilize this. But when you just throw it in, and I'm not talking about this money either. I'm talking about the policy itself. This money may be gone, but tomorrow's another day, and there may be other monies coming in. And by doing that, we set it up so that we look at it specifically different, and we live within the means that we already have, and not start to put pressure on people to get penalties and stuff to pay for our debts. So that's my close on that. Thank you.
All right. Unless there's any burning last thoughts, I would love to adjourn. I believe we made it through our.
There was just one quick thing that because
sure.
it came up last month. Randy, you recommended that we further increase our Endurus, which is our insurance, our vehicle, building, and staff insurance, that we increase it an additional $5,000 or $10,000 beyond what's in the proposed budget. So the proposed number is a 10% increase over the current year. Lynn has spoken to 2 separate people at Endurus, and they both said that 10% is the absolute most that the premium would increase. Lynn is currently compiling the information to get it submitted to Honduras. I think next week is when it's due. And then we expect to see the actual premium numbers end of June, early July. But I guess my recommendation, we went from so again, the $45,403 that's in the current budget is a 10% increase over current year. So my recommendation, Lynn and my recommendation, is to leave it at a 10% increase rather than increase it beyond that.
Okay. And I saw Jim's note too. I don't think we have time to think through it, but yeah, he looks at the money in
The
penalties.
philosophical question you're framing, like, should
Yep.
we put it in the operating budget or keep it all and then decide at some other point? So
Okay, more on this later, and I won't have much of a finance report, just we've got a budget, we've tried to look at this other resolution and it's thorny. Okay, well, this finance committee meeting is adjourned. We'll see you guys in 4 minutes.
Okay.